Okay, so hello everybody and welcome to a new OCA webinar. Today we will be talking about Australia's EV integration journey. With me I have Riccardo, who's one of our 4 OCA ambassadors, and he has also invited 2 guest speakers, Eloise and Dean. So welcome and thank you for joining us today. My name is Hanna Kolotzek. I am the Communications Officer at OCA and I will be hosting this webinar today. In the end, we will have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions or ideas that you would like to share, you can post them in the questions box on the right side of the webinar panel. Okay, so Riccardo, if you are ready to start, you can now share your slides and start the webinar.
Okay, they should be visible. Are they visible to you, Hannah?
Yes, they are.
Excellent. All right. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to all. I'm Riccardo Pagliarella. I'm based in Australia. I represent Greenergenic, which is a Korean domiciled business. We build technologies and consult on basically EVs, distributed energy resources, mostly here and throughout Asia, with some customers elsewhere. I've got a bit of a storied career because I'm one of many people in Australia that studied originally for the automotive industry. It kind of died, as many of you know, so it's been a checkered journey to find employment elsewhere. But I've worked for 20 years in vehicle electrification, from early Formula One and Tesla type stuff, with or for technology firms in R&D, productization for energy retailers and distributors, auto and EVSC OEMs and their tier 1 suppliers, for financiers, for regulators, policies and standards bodies. So I have a fairly holistic view of what goes on in our nation and a few others. I am the OCA's OCPP ambassador for Asia and Australia. When I travel, and I take it most of our audience is European, why talk about Australia? So when I travel overseas, with this face and this name, I usually get picked up as Italian. I do speak the language, so that discussion meanders for about 2 minutes before people realize I don't speak Italian that well at native levels. They realize I'm Australian, and the first thing they ask is usually about V2G or some format of EVs DER, and they ask essentially, what's it worth? There is an awareness that Australia has a highly volatile energy market, that Australia has good opportunities for monetization and productization of flexibility in energy markets, and that EVs should feature quite prominently in that. Much of this is helped by Australia being a high variable renewable energy generation market. We have no historical or presently forecast nuclear generation. We are getting off coal. Gas is expensive. We run the longest transmission network in the world. A system operator has big obligations. So we've got less people in California, but the system operator runs the electricity network, I want to say speculatively, at about double the budget. They also do gas. We are broadly big on data openness in Australia. So our ISP puts out, our system ISO puts out a very robust integrated system plan. We do a lot of knowledge sharing through our funding bodies, one of which is represented today. We have increasing efforts through energy distributors. There's a lot to talk about and a lot of opportunity. This is a photo of me that you'll find on LinkedIn. If you see that, please connect. A brief overview of what we've got here. We've got Eloise and Dean. Eloise is from Arena. Dean is from Reposit Power. I'm going to talk about those a little bit more, and as Hannah said, we'll get to some presentations, some Q&A later. So a bit about Australia. Very advanced renewable systems transition down here. Our energy market is one of the fastest settling, among the most volatile, with a very large spread in wholesale energy prices, among the most inclusive of DER and energy and services market participation. We have some of the strongest government support for DER adoption in the world. Our integrated system plan places very significant future reliance for the marginal cost of energy, which drives the cost of energy for all consumers, on DER, flexible DER, where EV should feature very heavily. We are #1 globally in the world for PV per capita, and our average residential solar installation size is 10 kilowatts. With feed-in tariffs trending towards zero, there's a strong interest in how to manage anything that consumes energy, electricity, and can be turned up, down, on, or off in ways that either better self-consume or leverage market volatility towards good ends. We even have ongoing metering reform that allows very DER-specific retail offerings to be built, even where I would say we're in CSMS vendors can make compliant metering systems out of hardware they may already have. So it's an opportunity not often explored in Australia, but which rule changes very recently allow. Tons of opportunity for DER and VPP. And after a long lull, we have been out of international forums like TC69 at the IEC, but we're back in now. Our market minimum guidance, we are a proliferant market in 1.6J for OCPP, but there's no standards that are formally adopted, but we are now very quickly moving towards minimum operating standards that will mandate OCPP 2.0.1 or otherwise stipulate it. We have a new Australian standard on interoperability requirements for inverter energy systems, which is probably the first standard in the world to reference OCPP 2.1 directly. Our Standards Australia body, which both makes Indigenous standards and adopts international standards through Fast Track. Methods now has a dedicated working group for EV charging infrastructure. So after a bit out of the game, Australia is very quickly trending towards good regulation, good legislation, and a competitive posture to these ends. So that's a bit about us. And EV uptake's good. We're past 10% now. A few challenges, we would say there's historically very little structural uptake of EV standards, frameworks, and the rest of it. And this is not to say that Australia is slow. On the one hand, we are the first nation in the world to adopt IEEE 2030.5 federally. So every solar system, every solar PV inverter sold in Australia must comply, for which a national PKI exists, and actuation within as much for minimum system load requirements. So when the grid really needs help, is to be complete across all mainland states within a year. And that's a fairly big and significant undertaking. The same posture for EV charging is not quite feature complete, we would say. So Security Profile 3 is at present not often implemented in Australia at all. We would lag most markets for that much. The ISO 15118 PKI ecosystem is nominally present, as in cars are shipped here that support it to various ends. EVSEs are shipped here that support it to various ends, but there is no presence or structural government support in market to these dates, to these ends. This being said, our market obligations probably differ with respect to cybersecurity, not significantly different to your own. The Security of Critical Infrastructure Act in Australia is the governing act for cyber requirements for critical infrastructure as named. Electric vehicle charging, particularly public charging, doesn't yet feature, but it is something of a discussion, and we would probably believe that in the near future, the things that we engineer here at the OCA will be completely normal and required in the Australian market. And as alluded, whilst we have growing EV uptake, our affordability compared to the markets represented by the audience on this call is probably lesser so. So we do have some structural support for EV affordability. It is targeted at a certain segment of the salary market through tax abated salary sacrifice. But in terms of affordability across the whole market, doesn't quite exist. So there is a very strong interest in Australia in using revenues from flexibility to abate the cost of either total cost of ownership or ideally the upfront purchase price of EVs. So that all being said, we get to opportunities. There's a lot going on here. A lot of companies in the automotive space come to Australia to get their product right, get their launches right, get their robustness right, and then go elsewhere. I don't mean that lightly. We have one of the lowest average sales per model of any market in the world. Extreme fragmentation and saturation, as in there's 1.1, 1.2 million annual sales of vehicles in Australia per year, modest on the global stage. It's served by over 60 brands at the moment, over 400 unique models, but the OEMs still come. They come to get it right here and then to go elsewhere. Our HEMS markets, our energy management services market, because of our highly flexible attitude to DER, is very advanced. I mean this with the sincerity of all respect for other nations represented, but the developments we see in other markets lag what has been present in the Australian market for 5 to 10 years, despite our market being much smaller. We've simply had market opportunity a lot earlier. We have a lot of Indigenous technology that can go elsewhere, but we have a lot of appetite through our disparity in what is possible in the EV space for foreign companies to come here and do good work. And we have extraordinarily plentiful government support for this end. So we have, among many funding bodies at state and federal level, the one that really shines is the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, which Eloise represents today, which has a very broad and ongoing mission for, correct me if I'm wrong, Eloise, nearly 10 years now? Something of that nature, all right? Quite a bit, and has a fund that Eloise will talk about that could be of interest to many attending. By the same token, Dean will talk eloquently of the recent federal government support for residential energy storage. Long story short, we actually had a month where residential storage outstripped solar PV sales in Australia in of themselves, which was quite extraordinary. So our federal government now provides very good incentives for stationary batteries right up to 50 kilowatt hours in homes, and people are buying them. They're not buying 5 or 10, they're buying quite large batteries. we have a federal government that wants to solve VPP yesterday. And this is one of the most interesting things about Australia, we would say. Our appetite for technology adoption and application of technology adoption in the EV space is very much backwards to many markets that may be represented on the call. So where we talk cybersecurity first, roaming as an application that is allowed by that, and V2G being an end state in many markets, the Australian federal government wants V2G yesterday. We'll take cybersecurity as a means of securing export and discharge because it's required. And roaming is something that, whilst we all believe it's important, we all believe it supports investment efficiency in the space, but it's something we can have tomorrow. We would have V2G quite yesterday. So to those ends, we have a brief introduction to Eloise and Dean. As mentioned, ARENA is awesome, and they are also relatively unique in being a funding body that develops pretty leading policy positions as a government body in Australia. So ARENA does put money into understanding the state of the art. They put money into understanding OCPP, the 15118 ecosystem, and the broader CCS system. They do a fair bit to those ends. Eloise herself has worked in sustainability and finance prior to joining our system operator, leaving as a senior analyst in the Future Energy Systems team, which is a fairly big deal to be in a market like Australia, which is already very future facing, and then work at the pointy end of that for the system operator. She worked as a consultancy and energy advisory for a bit and then joined ARENA as an investment manager. And then we have Dean, who is an information technology specialist. He started in financial trading, worked through DER, and now runs one of the best VPP firms in the country. He's also deeply involved in the Consumer Energy Technical Alliance. I got that right, Consumer Energy Tech Alliance, CETA, which is dedicated to realizing opportunities through fostering collaboration between industry, government, consumers, and ensuring that tech plays a role in advancing as much. In short, both have seen what's needed, both have seen what works, both have a good understanding of what will scale, and they've got a great insight of what will fit in our market. And I implore them to talk to that much. So with that, Eloise.
Brilliant. Thanks, Riccardo. And yeah, that was a very warm welcome. So we'll flick across to the next slides that I'll whiz through because you've done a wonderful job at introducing who ARENA are. But yeah, so we're from the Australian Renewable Energy Agency. So we're a federal government agency and see ourselves as sort of a bit of an innovation agency for renewable technology. And the mission statement was flashed up on the last screen, but essentially we look to achieve this mission through providing financial assistance in the form of grant funding, as well as sharing knowledge. So on the next slide, we do this across our 5 strategic priority areas. And the ones I've got highlighted there optimize the transition to renewable electricity and decarbonized transport. I've got them highlighted because in ARENA, we've split up our focus on DER and EVs. So electric vehicles sit in our transport team, and the rest of DER sits under that optimize the transition to renewable electricity. So on the next slide, the main funding programs that ARENA use to support the DER and EV trials and pilots are Advancing Renewable Program and also Driving the Nation Program. So there's a lot of words here, but a couple of things to highlight. Last year, the Driving the Nation program announced $100 million towards a range of new focus areas. So 100 million is what we've got to throw at the problem, and these focus areas include innovation to support the uptake of battery electric vehicles. So a relatively broad bucket, but what we're thinking about in that bucket are things like supporting apartment charging, grid support, and projects and demonstrations to support the commercialization and uptake of vehicle to grid. On the DER side, this is more about the fundamental as plumbing to support DER being able to hook into our wholesale market and distribution market. Moving on, so next couple of slides, I think Riccardo also covered this really well around Australia's energy transition and DER landscape, but these maybe provide some colourful charts to match what he was saying before. So Australia, like many other countries, have had some pretty sizable uptake of renewables in the past decade. Wind, solar, batteries, and DER, which we're absolutely romping home on. It's now, DER is the largest fuel source, solar PV, in capacity terms across the NEM. And I think it now exceeds something like 20 gigawatts, which is pretty extraordinary for the size of system that we've got in Australia. What is a little bit different in the Australian market is how some of this manifests in terms of wholesale price and the ability to monetize our DER assets. So on the east coast of Australia, in the national electricity market, we have an energy only market that clears every 5 minutes. So every 5 minutes, the market clears between negative $1,000 per megawatt hour and $20,300 per megawatt hour. So that is an extraordinary spread of prices. And we actually get extraordinary volatility thanks to the big uptake of our variable renewable resources. This creates a huge opportunity for people to be like Dean and others to be able to come in and arbitrage the market. On top of this, and I won't go into it too much because I'm sure Dean will touch on it, we've got 10 frequency control ancillary service markets that sit next to our energy market, which provide further opportunity to monetize our DER. All right, moving on there, Riccardo. So the high prices and volatility are generally a good signal that the market is in need of additional and cheaper capacity and energy. So Riccardo spoke to the fact that our ISO, called AEMO, is our central planner and have got DER as really a central pillar of the future plan for Australia and the national electricity market. So what we see here is just demonstrating that out to 2050, you can see in the big blue bars there, the capacity of energy that we think is going to be coordinated DER that we're planning for, that is central to the plans that we've got in our industry and in government. So this is a really big deal. In terms of the V2G opportunity, again, recognised as a bit on this slide, ARENA have commissioned a fair few rounds of modelling to understand the magnitude of that opportunity here in Australia. And it's in the billions, it's really big. And we think that vehicle to grid, including vehicle to home, represent one of the largest potential enablers of Australia's energy transition. So not dissimilar to what the ISO was saying before. So to bring that all home, government, central planners and industry think that DER and vehicle to grid are game changers for Australia and are backing this into how we think about our future grid. The challenge that we have in front of us for Australia is getting our policy settings right and aligning industry standards and protocols to actually be able to support scale adoption. So there's a fair bit of work afoot on the next slide to ensure that the policy settings are there to support DER. So the industry has really coalesced around the federal government's CER roadmap, which I've highlighted there on the left, which provides this overarching policy vision. But there's also a whole lot of changes that need to happen on the ground in terms of the rules that govern how we participate in the markets, as well as state-based regulations, technical standards, and so on, which industry are really picking up with gusto. It's great to see. So I think, as Riccardo said, Australia is already in a really great place to host and extract value from DER, but it's getting even better and it's getting even easier. So on the next slide has a bit of a deep dive into some of the ways ARENA has been leaning into this transition. So we've been playing in this space for a while. Our bread and butter is supporting pilots and trials that demonstrate impact. However, importantly, we do also lean into that policy and standard space. So if these slides are also being shared afterwards, all of these images are clickable. So click on them and it'll take you to the relevant reports. But I'm not going to dive into any of them specifically now unless anyone's got questions after. On the next slide, there are two pieces that I just wanted to highlight on the standards front. Oh, sorry, let's go back. I thought there was another slide. So the first is just the development of the CCIP-OZ protocol. So many of you will know, if we just go back one, Riccardo, it's coming up as BIDI roadmap for me. Anyway, so many of you know that the CCIP-OZ protocol is an adaptation of the CCIP standard developed in California, which was adjusted to meet Australian requirements and is based on IEEE 2030.5. So ARENA provided funding support really early on for the development and engagement of this protocol, and we're continuing to support the development of the latest 1.3 version as well as driving national consistency through testing and certification, including development of things like reference implementations and test harnesses. So our role in leaning into the DER and V2G space far surpasses just your ordinary standards and trials. So in terms of vehicle to grid and closing the gap there, we skip across to the next slide, Riccardo. We've also been doing plenty of work in this space, particularly around thought leadership. So I mentioned the federal government CER roadmap before. Well, what we've got up here is the National Roadmap for Bidirectional EV Charging, which was actually in action from the federal government CER roadmap that was enacted and funded by ARENA in partnership with Race for 2030. So this up here is the result. I'm not going to go through it in any amount of detail, but there are about 30 actions and 18 recommendations that are split across those 5 colourful boxes down the bottom. In the end, what we're trying to do is unlock consumer access to V2G technologies to then accelerate uptake in the community and drive widespread benefits. So the piece I'm going to just drill down into quickly before handing over to Dean is that item D there on interoperability and standards. So on the next slide, the bidirectional roadmap identified 5 recommended actions for interoperability and standards to support vehicle to grid. I don't know if there's a lag. Let's go one more.
It should be up there.
There we go. Maybe I'm the one with the lag. So these recommendations really focused on EVSE interoperability and local EVSE control. And they coalesce around providing clear market direction and support for OCPP 2.x, as well as ISO 15118-20. So I think, as Riccardo pointed to, there's a huge amount of discussion in industry and government in Australia at the moment about these standards and protocols. Specifically through the CER roadmap, the federal government is seeking information from the market on market readiness for OCPP 2.x and ISO 15118 and the impact of setting minimum requirements at different levels in the market. The government have also said that where government funding is used for EV charging equipment, that infrastructure should be OCPP 201 compliant or later. So there is market direction that's forming at the government level. And as I said before, at ARENA, we see ourselves as Australia's innovation agency, and we see ourselves as having a role in catalysing change in the market and supporting best practice. So we see a lot of benefit of OCPP 201 and 2.1 over 1.6J. I'm not going to tell this group how to suck eggs or the benefits of that, but what I will say is that we've been doing quite a bit in our projects to set OCPP 201 as a minimum expected standard in the projects that we are supporting where practical, and where not, at the very least, have our recipients' technology roadmaps, including demonstration and strides towards being able to meet those versions, including demonstration through a single use case if possible. So to us, the direction that we're taking here is absolutely aligned with the intent of the bidirectional roadmap that we put out and presents no regrets actions that are going to continue to advance interoperability in Australia to the benefit of to the benefit of businesses and consumers rather. So as one cheeky plug before I give the mic to Dean, I mentioned at the start that ARENA's got several funding programs open, including $100 million under Driving the Nation to put towards projects that are advancing innovation to support the uptake of battery electric vehicles, including things like alignment and uplift of standards and protocols. So my details are in the deck. And if anyone does want to have a further chat about this, Australia is very much open for business, and we are very much looking to support people in this area. All right, Dean, I think it's your time.
Thank you, Eloise, and thank you everyone for making a bit of time this afternoon or this morning or whatever it is where you are. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Reposit Power. It's been doing DER and VPP for 12 years in Australia. The first batteries ever deployed at residential connection points and maybe anywhere in Australia were put down by us in 2013 and were supported at that time by ARENA. We had to take batteries intended for mining and have them slightly changed to make them go on people's homes. And some of them are still running, actually. My background was in finance, high-frequency commodity trading, and technology. I was berated by my wife for being an evil finance person and told to do something good for the world. And so I moved into delivering returns on capital for renewable assets. Identified that electricity storage was going to be the most important thing to do in about 2011. So I left my job at a demand response aggregator, which was my first swing in energy, and I went and started this company, Reposit. We built a electricity services co-optimization engine based upon financial signals. And the reason we did that is because Australia deregulated its electricity market very comprehensively in the mid-90s, and the rules of that deregulation are based upon the delivery of electricity services. And so the system is split up into the provision of multiple electricity services, and those electricity services are assigned a value every 5 minutes, every quarter, every year, and there are penalties and rewards for delivering those services, as well as measurement criteria and validation criteria. That makes it very useful for a high-frequency commodity trader to be able to build the maths and the processing infrastructure to deliver multiple services from one asset. And what me and my co-founder, Lachlan, discovered at the time was that we could do that with relatively cheap hardware, and that the best place to deploy that hardware was on small batteries at the edge of the network, where there are the most available electricity services to be co-optimized. And so that is what we did. We have thousands of households now using the controller. It is edge-based processing and control. We do not control from central data centers. That means that our ability to deliver services is very firm, so it's very reliable, and our ability to bid in aggregate is also very reliable. And so what that allowed us to do was to build a commercial proposition to try and get as many of these controllers into the world and attached to as many batteries as possible. Can we go to the next slide, please? And so my focus over the years has turned from building a reliable platform by which we can co-optimize a piece of electricity storage for revenues and for the avoidance of costs, into the commercial proposition that needs to be provided to a household to accept our controller and a piece of electricity storage on their home. People are, and this is like a business to consumer play in a very utility focused industry with a lot of heavy government regulation. And so what we do is we have to walk a very, very fine line between delivering robust electricity services that compete with grid scale and utility storage, but deliver it from very fragmented distribution network connected storage that is coordinated with a set of mathematics, basically, and centralized fan-in bidding. And then the only way that we were able to gain acceptance from the system operator, from AEMO, was to prove over many, many years that the megawatts and megawatt hours that we said we could provide into these services actually were provided when they were required. And over many years, we gained acceptance into those markets, and we now trade in a bunch of them. We'll talk about that in a sec. The customers, however, have different ideas. They are not just going to accept third-party control of their assets. They have bought these batteries for something, typically to try and reduce their bills, and they want something in return. And this is at the moment in Australia is kind of the contest of what is the business model for the consumer. Is it share revenue? Is it provide a discount on the battery? Is it provide cheap finance for the battery? And Reposit is the only one guaranteeing no electricity bills for 7 years. So our hope, and it does seem to be working out, is that if you are able to completely remove a household's exposure to electricity bills, they will accept your offering on their battery. And so that is what we offer. We've offered it since mid-2021, and we offer it profitably, which is, can you go to the next slide, please? Which is partly a function of the Australian electricity system. The only way that we get this done and do it profitably is because we are able to reliably earn revenues when the revenue opportunities occur. The Australian market is extremely volatile. I think the South Australian electricity market is still the most volatile commodity market on the planet. And that's great for us. Having high speed control, locally connected via Modbus, and mainly delivering commands to power electronics connected to strong DC sources, so batteries and solar when the sun's out, allows us to be confident that when we make a bid of capacity, we're able to deliver it, and be confident that our co-optimization mathematics will turn into the correct control signals, which will then turn into the correct current flows. Can we go to the next slide? Is it going? Who knows? I'll just keep talking. Because the key to it is the controller, and that controller's job is to turn disaggregated small storage and solar sources, but most of the values in storage, into aggregated and reliable sources of megawatts and megawatt hours. And as a result of the way that the system works, we think about megawatts and megawatt hours participating in electricity services as a primary concern. We don't worry about it being hot water systems or cars or household batteries. We look at what kind of megawatts and megawatt hours have we got, and how can we condition them into the megawatts and megawatt hours that we need to deliver to earn revenue, and are we able to do it in quantities that allow us to compete in either bilateral contracts or real-time markets, or in emerging services, of which there are more and more in Australia. Can you just try and get the next slide again, please? I can't tell if I'm lagged or if there we go. And so at the moment, we sell the storage and the solar ourselves. And that is because in the past, we did not do that. And we integrated with a lot of different battery and inverter manufacturers. And we found it was very, very difficult to get those inverter and battery manufacturers to keep a stable API or to keep stable performance. We also found that the proliferation of manufacturers into Australia, because it's actually, we've gone backwards to the next one, just leave it there for the moment. The proliferation of manufacturers meant that we spend a lot of time writing drivers and debugging firmwares and the like. And for a business that must depend upon megawatts and megawatt hours being delivered, sometimes at, you know, very, very fast, like 50 millisecond type lags, it was too difficult for us. So we did vertically integrate into selling solar and battery systems. There are multiple advantages to that, but the key one is that when you couple that with a no-build proposition, you are able to gain full control of the asset, and you are able to make the asset dance a lot more complicated dances, which allows you to co-optimize for a whole lot more electricity services, which allows you to make more revenues. We provide services into each of the light blue circles, and I've put a broad estimate of value of each of those circles. And you can see that we provide them directly to the customer in terms of retail tariff arbitrage in multiple ways, including now 5-minute dynamic network pricing as a part of a thing called Project Edith. And that's running in Sydney, Australia's largest city. The general reduced reliance on the grid just from self-consumption as well. The management of solar, which in Australia is a big deal. We are entering into a thing increasingly often called minimum system load, where we are unable to keep our synchronous generation operating because we have so much solar. And so we need to be able to curtail that solar. And then the delivery of backup power. In Australia, the delivery of backup power is one of those consumer services, customer services that people want. Despite the fact we have a pretty reliable system, it speaks more to the psyche of Australians than anything else, really. On the wholesale side, we do energy arbitrage in terms of the wholesale market, which has a $21,300 spread now, and that keeps on sort of increasing every year or so. And we also participate in 8 frequency control markets, of frequency raise and frequency lower, and 4 of each at different timescales. The fastest now, I think, being 200 milliseconds. They slowed it down recently, contentiously. And then on the network side, we deliver network support, which is basically managing thermal and constraint issues on the distribution network. And increasingly, we're being asked to do voltage control. We deliver voltage control by delivering current, but also by delivering reactive power, both sinking and sourcing, and modifying the conductor properties to be able to soak up voltage. Again, because we have so much solar in Australia, we have issues maintaining voltage on our low voltage networks, which are ostensibly 11,000 volt medium voltage networks running to 400 volt 3-phase networks. And they vary increasingly as the amount of solar gets put onto the grid. And we also provide real-time data directly into the SCADA systems of multiple networks now, so that the monitoring that we have of the system is available directly into the advanced ADMS systems that the networks operate. And we get paid for all these things. The one that isn't on the circle, but is in the list, and it's particular to Australia, is a thing called Reliability and Emergency Reserve Trader. That is the step before unscheduled load shedding, step before blackouts system service that the market operator consumes. And we get called at least once every year in that. So we've been doing that one for 5 or 6 years now. So we are co-optimizing a very small, relatively inexpensive piece of storage to do quite a lot of things. We generate quite a lot of revenue, and as a result, we can guarantee no electricity bills. Okay, I think that's the slide most people are going to be interested in, to be fair. Can we go to the next one, please? The hard part of all of this, not that one back. The hard part of all, surely there's one in between.
There it is, yes.
There you go. There it is. The hard part of all of this is that consumers need to trust you, and they need to trust the electricity system that they are trying to get away from, to be able to gain the acceptance of providing services from their assets. They have bought these assets. They don't want to share the asset, particularly with the electricity system that they see as faceless and maybe extractive, and definitely complicated and definitely inscrutable. And so in the last 11 weeks, there's been 400 megawatts and 1.2 gigawatt hours of storage installed at residences in Australia. That is in 11 weeks. That is now 5 times faster to lay down a megawatt hour at a residential scale than it is at utility scale. 4% of that capacity will provide grid services. 4%. 96% of that capacity will simply fill up from the solar and empty out in the nighttime, and then maybe tomorrow it'll fill up from the solar if it's not cloudy, and it'll do it over and over again. That is a lot of capacity that is essentially not under control, and it is 100% as a result of the nature of the consumer ecosystem when it comes to electricity. And I bring this up because I think vehicles will have a similar but maybe worse issue. And the key challenge from a commercial and model perspective is how can we apply the reliable trading and co-optimization capacity that we have for things that don't move, residential batteries, that if they go empty, it's not that bad, residential batteries, and they don't have any identity really attached to them. But when you start thinking of vehicles, people see that in Australia at least as their expression of freedom, and you cannot have the battery be flat, and you cannot have the car be damaged in any way, and you cannot even risk the car in any way. It is something that causes me to pause on V2G, but it's not something that is intractable, because just like there's so much value to be unlocked in the residential storage, there's an order of magnitude more to be unlocked in V2G. And in Australia, our state of the art commercially is how do we get that capacity to become available to the grid in general. That is a marketing question. Once all the technical things are solved, it is a collaboration and partnership question. It is how do we talk to these people and how do we make them happy that the benefits of sharing their car are worth them sharing their car. And I'll stop there.
All right, I'll speed through some closing notes so that we have at least 10 minutes of question time. Look, some key lessons and then some OCPP points. Australia walked a really different path to get to standards and framework adoption, and other markets will too. The driver to 2, OCPP 2 family, is driven mostly by V2G and pending security requirements and latterly roaming, as we talked about. But the market gets there all the same. So please trust us, 3 of us, when we say it. The OCA's work is just as relevant, and member opportunity is just as strong down here. Come to Australia. Per Dean and Elle's notes, volatility services really do pay, and energy distributors really do care. There is not an energy distribution company in Australia that doesn't run non-intrusive load monitoring for EV loads today, and the vast majority of them, bar one in Tasmania, that's the part that gets left off the map fairly often, and has a lot of hydro. But almost all of them have done low voltage transformer upgrades to accommodate EV load, even at our limited level of penetration. So there are many opportunities, not just to limit total cost of opportunity, but to lower vehicle cost magnitudes beyond what's readily explored. If our battery subsidy was applied at 1-to-1 with the vehicle opportunity, were V2G available, it wouldn't be. I would stress it would not be, simply because availability is lower, but it would be an Australian $16,000 or so reduction of the upfront cost of a car. So there is material government interest to get this done. And per Dean's notes on the Nobel offer, would offer that the ultimate difference between scaled commercialization and science experiments is measured in the volume and type of your customers. Engineers are not a customer segment, they don't scale. Who is attracted and how matters. So as he ended, the marketability of what's done matters. So on the last bits, before we wrap up and go to question time, just some dropouts for the OCA and OCPP more generally. We have a live and active discussion on OCPP and its use as a protocol. We often say in task groups, we have members saying OCPP is for public charging, home charging does its own thing. Completely incorrect. There is a live and active discussion for OCPP in HEMS, for OCPP as a local protocol. The 2.x family will obviously do it. We need to bend that sentiment and communicate it quite readily, not least as the interoperability OCPP provides creates investment efficiency, and investment efficiency creates scale in this segment. It's very nearly the last protocol standing for easy adoption of vehicle charging integration in smart and flexible ways. We do have consultants that will want to debate about Modbus versus Matter versus God knows what else, but most integrators simply want to get on with it, and one protocol helps. We're very, very close to that, I think. And the further we go, the better we all are. I would say that primary frequency response is real, and it really does pay. So Australia is the exemplar market to learn about what that does. There's an increase in global interest. It's been brewing in Europe for the last few years. The Mercury Consortium has brought that to bear with their service levels, which OCPP is, I would say, intended to snap to. We don't have a formal agreement just yet with these people, but there is interest in what we do and what we actuate, what we enable, and how serviceable, how fast the services can be. There is good work in OCPP 2.1 Block R, but we can go further. Ideally, we want to get to a situation where there are no extra meters, no additional metrology, no extensions to protocols as we've done before. If we can work structurally as a community through our working groups, I think we can do great things with OCPP. The PKI point here is very poorly written. I know there are some cybersec experts on the call. Some greater consideration on PKI with respect to OCPP and smart grid protocols is worthwhile. We have done quite well to pat down the DSO model integration, where there's one point of integration from CSMS to an ADMS over at distributor's home, if you will. Though our experience in market being quite advanced is that energy distributors increasingly have per appliance reach. It does sound like monopoly extension until we start working out how to really manage minimum system load. And to those ends, what does cybersecurity at scale look like? If there aren't approaches that can be readily unified or cross-certified, we do get into socialized costs in market that are very difficult for any market to bear. We would stress here on market homologation and impact that Australia is not the only country that wants better and struggles for leading insight. Unlike Europe, unlike the US, unlike South Korea, unlike many markets where vehicle OEMs draw a lot of this interest to market by virtue of, if you're selling a product that sells for tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, you want the best experience. Ours all left in the mid-2010s. We don't make cars here anymore, and there are many markets just like that around the world. So accordingly, there is an opportunity for formal guidance from the OCA as a community to markets that are more formally looking to adopt OCPP beyond de facto adoption. What to adopt, how to adopt, product and service homologation and certification advice, guidance on best ways to leverage OCPP and the OCA community of practitioners, vendors, certifiers and the like may better help as we open our protocol beyond the purview of consultants and advisors. Australia has tried this. We have many consultants. Consultants have historically made a lot of money down here. We've had crap advice. OCPP has and can do great things, and anything that increases the rate of learning and adoption helps. I would end noting that I'm the inaugural ambassador for OCPP in our region. The ultimate success of the proliferation of this community in our region is that I get a call from Lonica one day that says, "We found your replacement and we're happy with it." And that's a place we should aspire to land. So with that, I'll open it back to Lorenz and Hannah, and we'll take questions.
Yes, so thank you very much for presenting. So now we have 10 minutes left, so maybe it's a good time to start the Q&A. We'll have a look at the first question, which goes to Eloise. So it's how can foreign firms work together with ARENA, and what sort of supply of support can ARENA provide?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. ARENA, as an Australian federal government agency, is really focused on innovation that supports Australia. So for those companies, the best way to engage with this, my details are on there, to send me an email with what you're thinking about. We can respond to you directly because every project is unique. We do like to have part of that project that is Australian based, but we do also spend quite a bit of time importing good ideas from overseas. So the recommendation is just to get in touch.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Then we have a question for Dean. So what's the appetite from governments and customers for V2G locally? So like what's the customer appetite? What's the government interest to fund it? Can you explain a little bit?
So government interest to fund it is all Eloise, and it's the simple answer is $100 million. That's the government interest, and then some. That's just from the federal government. There's money available from the state governments as well. It's a very hot topic in Australia at the moment. We know we're going to have a lot of electric vehicles, and we know we have a lot of grid services that need to be provided for us to get to our net zero targets. Appetite from consumers is interesting and measured variously. I get on our sales lines probably no more than 10% of consumers asking about vehicle to grid at the moment. It is steadily going up, but it is still very much an early adopter idea, and there's very, very few, if any, real scale of V2G capable vehicles doing V2G in the system. We have a few, a couple of other people like us have a few, but from my perspective, I find the OEM's reluctance to provide the control points is a key restrictive factor, and the reason why we have not yet delivered a no-build product based on vehicle to grid, which we would love to do in Australia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all right, thank you. We have another question about V2G potential. So is the full battery taken into consideration or only parts of it? Because here's an example. So the owner may like to have at least 75% of capacity, which should always be present, so that he can use the EV anytime. So can you explain a little bit about that?
That's not unusual. It's very common on stationary batteries as well in Australia because they like backup. And so in a lot of systems, particularly larger systems, and as Riccardo said, people are installing 50 kilowatt hour systems now. That's what the subsidy is incentivizing. A slab of that battery, half of it, 40% of it, 60% of it is often firewalled off for backup purposes, simply because under most circumstances of a blackout, you did not know was coming. So you just want to make sure it's there. Batteries that are empty are not very good for backup. And so the strong, long-lived, many years of experience now of compartmentalizing batteries for multiple services. That's all part of the co-optimization.
Mm-hmm. And there's also a slight difference as well when we think about it from an individual value perspective, as well as a whole of system value and potential perspective. So for some of the modelling that Arena's done, where I think, as I said before, that we've valued the V2G opportunity for Australia, it's simply in the billions. It's very, very large. When we look at that modelling, it's very macro. So we're looking at uptake across a very big region, and then there are assumptions that go into that around percentage of EV uptake that's looking like it's going to be vehicle to grid, and then percentage of that's available. So there's a smearing that occurs there, and we've got all our reports online, so you can see all of the assumptions. But we ran a whole lot of sensitivities, and whatever way we've been able to cut it, there's a B in front of that number. So it is quite large.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add to that, Hannah, is that we, particularly from a standards perspective, there are gaps. So can we manage capabilities quite well? Yes, we see early to market V2G opportunities overseas that are driven by vehicle OEMs themselves, where control and the battery state and all sorts of other data through a comms chain is partially through the connector, but partially also through telematics or through custom protocols on the connector. We would say, shortcutting a long and complex discussion, that what is available through the charging interface does not yet completely allow third-party integrators to make truly interoperable products. We're interested in pushing that envelope in Australia. mostly because we're very unlikely to get the likes of GM Energy or Ford setting up an energy business here. Some vendors might, Tesla's been hiring staff in that instance in Australia. Tesla pioneers a lot of stuff in Australia when it comes to energy. But for third-party integrators, it's equally important. We have a lot of Chinese EV OEMs in the country. They're the fastest growing segment of all. Most of their parent companies are less interested in being vertically integrated service providers, more interested in working with companies that will help them sell cars. And to those ends, there is good opportunity, very good opportunity.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. Then we got a question about OCP 2.1. So do you see a use for OCP 2.1 DER control only for V2G or also for regular charging, so for public or
regular everything? I was involved in that work group. So were many others, but there was the one Australian voice. When it landed here among our distribution system operator cohort, they quite literally thought it was written for them. So there is very strong and interesting uptake. That does, or interest in the uptake, that does pay into how we homologate OCPP 2.1. There are obviously core and optional functionalities. Would Australia be more interested in taking a core and security profile 3 or something that is a more full specification as de facto or otherwise mandated in market? I'd suggest we would ultimately lean towards the latter. Because the DER block is very, very, very important to us. It can lead to very good investment efficiencies, but that is a design comment. The how that scales in market comment is less a function of the protocol itself and more a design and determination of market question.
Mm-hmm. All right, yeah, thanks. So we'll move on to the next question. So there are some political tensions between Australia and China. And on the other hand, Chinese manufacturers like BYD bring V2G to the market. So is it wise to integrate these in your energy system, or what measures should be taken to ensure that, cybersecurity
the tension is overblown? No. Please don't read news too literally. Dean drives an MG or a SAIC. My charging stations at home are mostly Star Charge. I run a fleet of them. There is great consumer appetite. The cybersecurity concerns would apply irrespective of what the originating countries were. The bigger question for market is how do we regulate cyber in the space? So we do have, through the Australian Signals Directorate and other bodies, very competitive regulations around cyber. Have they touched the EV segment just yet? No. Are they about to? Yes, and it'll be an even hand for all vendors, irrespective of nationality.
Sorry.
Please, Dan.
I think one of the things that the lived experience, so all of our equipment comes from China, and I spend a lot of time with Chinese vendors, and it's important to separate the Chinese vendors from the Chinese government, and where you can do that is in trusting but checking. So not going in and being naive to the realities of that supply chain, but also not making it the primary focus of the supply chain. My perspective is that Chinese supply chain is what's going to get the world out of this climate change problem. They have set themselves up for it, and the scale and the quality of the equipment is incredible. And we just need to just make sure that the downsides of that are managed using appropriate technology, experience, skills, and regulation. And Australia is on the front edge of that. We have a lot of Chinese manufacturers in the country and have for a long time. We are alive to the risks, and we manage them probably better than anybody else just because of the volume of exposure that we have. I think that is one of the benefits of internationals working with Australia. There is a transfer of knowledge and technology and skills transfer that can go in both directions about making supply chain from China appropriate and beneficial for countries that are not China.
Not to labour the point, but just to provide an ARENA perspective as well. Fully agree with what Dean's said there. And ARENA has plenty of examples of projects within transport and in fact across all of our technology classes that are either with Chinese companies or utilise Chinese technologies.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. Thank you. So now we can move on to the last question, because we're already at the end of this webinar. Last one is also for Dean, really practical question. So would the no bill guarantee also apply if a household has 1 or 2 EVs that charge at home?
Absolutely. A lot of our no bill customers have 1 or 2 EVs that charge at home. One of the points of the no bill guarantee, and because of my personal passion for avoiding the worst of climate change, is that it provides a very, very clear signal to a household to stop burning things. When you have your electricity for free, you don't want to burn gas and you don't want to burn fuel. Like, it is a very, very clear signal to make the reinvestment in appliances that are powered by electricity. And then most of the electricity we provide is very clean. So it's the best thing that I can think of doing personally and commercially to improve Australians' carbon footprint.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Okay. So for now, we've answered all questions. Thank you, everybody, for listening and for sharing your questions, and also to our speakers for all your insights. We will publish a recording of this webinar on YouTube. It will be available in a few hours, so you can watch the webinar again or share it with people that might be interested. If you have any more questions for us, you can reach out to our speakers. They shared their contact details here on the last slide, so you can ask them directly. You can also contact the Open Charge Alliance, of course, and then we will come back to you. If you like this webinar, make sure to follow us on LinkedIn or check our website to be up to date about our latest events. Yeah, so for now, I will close the session. Thank you again for bringing your questions and for presenting. So have a good day. Goodbye.
Thank you, Hannah. Ciao.